All right, let's get started. So welcome once again. Welcome to this webinar, this Tableau Public webinar. This is a slightly more advanced training. So ideally you already have some experience using Tableau Public. If you have not, don't worry either. I'm going to go through the whole process of creating a data visualization and publishing it to the web in the first 5 minutes or so that you can follow along during the rest of the webinar, and you should be able to learn something nonetheless. That said, we also offer introductory webinars to Tableau Public on our website, which is public.tableau.com. So feel free to go back to those as well. Today's webinar will look at one specific topic in more detail, and that's cleaning and preparing data sets. What I'm showing here is kind of abstract process of how you go through a typical data visualization. Typically you start, looking for your data. Well, ideally you start with, formulating a question or a hypothesis, or you have some kind of topic that you want to look at, and then the next step you go look for data. And of course, often the data is not in the ideal format, or there are some problems with it, so you need to clean it, and then you need to prepare the data set so that you can use it. In the next step, you then analyze the data, and then once you find an interesting story in the data, you create a chart that you want to publish, and then finally you'd save it to Tableau Public, the online platform, and then from there you can share this visualization, or you can embed it into your web page, into your article, into your blog. So I've highlighted here those 3 steps. They can all happen in Tableau Desktop. For those of you who are new to Tableau, if you want to publish visualizations on the web, you need to download a program called Tableau Desktop Public Edition, which is the free version of Tableau Desktop. If you have another version, you can also use that. But for publishing visualization on the web, the free version is enough. And then once you've created the visualization in the app, you would upload it to this platform, public.tableau.com. So those are the two components that you need. As I said, today I'd like to focus on this part here. And what do I mean by that? Some of the things I want to address today are listed here. At the beginning, I'll just show you what the ideal format would be, what kind of format Tableau likes. And then we look at how we can use Tableau to clean up the data, particularly using the data interpreter, which is an automatic algorithm. So we look at that. And then the other thing we'll look at is how you can join different data sources together so that you have one big table after joining 2 or more separate tables. We can also look at unions, which is another way to merge tables. In joins, you're basically joining columns from different tables. Whereas in unions, you join the row, you merge the rows from different tables, so you create a longer table. We can then look at splits. You can split up columns when there's information hidden in a column. You can extract that using the split function. We can also look at pivots. How do you reshape your data, your table, from a wide format to a tall format. And time permitting, we can also look at how you do the opposite, how you go from tall to wide. And maybe we can also look at some calculated fields. I've put time permitting here because this is the first time we're doing this format. It's the first time we're trying this syllabus. So we'll have to see how much time we have at the end. I also want to make this interactive, so I'll give you a chance to ask questions in between. So it also depends how many questions you have and how much time we need for questions. How do you ask questions? You can ask questions using the chat box. Unfortunately, I won't be able to hear you. You've been put on mute automatically, so as to avoid any background noise. But there's a chat box that you can use, and you should already see I've already been typing into that chat box. Feel free to drop any questions in there, and I'll stop in between to take a look at the chat box. If there are any questions after the webinar, feel free to reach out to me or my colleagues, and we're happy to answer any more questions you might have later on. All right, let's get started. Let's start with the ideal format. So what kind of format does Tableau like? Let me open up a simple data set. This is a table that I copied from Wikipedia. Tables in Wikipedia are almost perfect for Tableau. Tables in Wikipedia typically come in this format where you have different columns. In this case, we're looking at the largest metropolitan areas in the world. So you have a column here with the cities. You have a column with the country, and then you have a column that tells you how large those cities are, the official population numbers. And you can see the first row has the column headers, or the variable names if you want. And then the subsequent rows, each row is one data point. And that's the format that Tableau likes. So let's use this in Tableau. Let me open up Tableau. And let's look at the largest cities in the world. So this is what it looks like. You need to tell Tableau what kind of file you're connecting to. In this case, it's an Excel file. And you choose your Excel file, and you click Open. And you get a preview of the data. And this looks pretty similar to what we've just seen in Excel, which is good. And here you can see how the first row is interpreted as a column header. These are the variable names, and you can see the individual data rows underneath. So that looks all good. One other thing to point out for those of you who are still new to Tableau, these little icons here that indicate what Tableau thinks this data is. So city and country are interpreted as geographic variables, which is why you get that little globe symbol, whereas the population numbers are interpreted as a quantitative variable, a number, which is why you get this hex symbol. If you ever find that this is wrong, you can change this manually by going into this menu, and you can tell Tableau, no, this is actually a text variable or a date or whatnot. In this case, it's all fine, so we can open up our first worksheet. So in Tableau, for each chart, you would want to create a new worksheet. And on these worksheets, you can build your charts. And there are several ways you can build a chart. One way is to grab the variables, which are now listed on the side here. You have the quantitative variables down here and the text variables up here. And you can just grab them and drag them onto the canvas. So that's one way to create a chart in Tableau. So let's do that. Let's grab the country, and it will automatically create a map for us because it's a geographic variable. And we can add the cities. We can see where the largest cities in the world. Of course, we want to know how large are those cities, so we're gonna drag our population variable onto the canvas as well. And now we get the size of the circle to indicate the size of the city. Can make that all a bit bigger. I might format it a bit. I might choose a color, and I might make it a little semi-transparent and add a border. And I can see there's a lot of large cities over here in China and in India, and a few in the other regions of the world. Maybe let's create one more chart. We'll open a new worksheet. This time I'm going to use the Show Me menu. I want to do a bar chart so I can compare the size more easily. It's not very easy to compare the sizes on a map. So let's just grab a city, and I'll hold the Control key, and I'll grab the population variable. And using the Show Me menu, I select horizontal bars as my chart type. And maybe I'll sort the bars, and there we go. Now I can easily compare. I can easily see which is the largest metropolitan area. It's Tokyo, followed by Shanghai, Seoul, and a bunch of Chinese cities. Final thing maybe to do is to combine those two charts on a dashboard. So you can open up a new dashboard. You can put the bar chart there. We can put the map below it. We can give it a meaningful title. And maybe we can make it interactive so that when you click on a bar, it will highlight in the map where that city is. And final thing to do then is to publish this to the web. Here I need to give my credentials so I can log on to my online account. I'll give it a name. And now I create the code, and the browser should pop up, and it would generate the code, and it will load the visualizations in the browser in my profile, and from here I can embed this visualization into my own article or my own blog. All right, cool. So this is in a nutshell the whole process for those of you who are still new to Tableau. Going back to Tableau Desktop, you saw this is the ideal format of the data. Unfortunately, of course, data doesn't always come in this format, so the next thing we want to look at is what can you do when it doesn't look like that. I've got another data set here. Let's look at this one. This is a little more messy. This is a data set that looks at hooligans in England in English football. Particularly it looks at arrest by club supported and type of offense. So you can see the different data points are the different clubs of English football, Premier League football, or soccer for those of you in the States. So that's good, but you can already see a couple of problems with the data set. First of all, we have these headers and these footnotes. And then the second problem is we have these multi-row column headers. We've got a column header that's a little messed up over here. And then we have the double headers where it says type of offense, and then it has the individual offenses below it. Violent disorder, public disorder, and so on. So this is not ideal, but Tableau can deal with this. So since version 9.0, we've been adding more and more data cleaning functionalities to Tableau, and we can use in particular this feature called the data interpreter that will strip out all the things that we don't need, and it will try to squeeze this whole thing into a usable table. Let's see how that works. Let me put that aside. Let me close this, and I'll open up a new instance of Tableau. Yep. There we go. I'll connect to my Excel file. I get this preview, and now we can see all these problems, all these empty cells that shouldn't be there. There are no headers. It just gives us F1, F2, F3. So this is not good. And this is where the data interpreter now comes in. There's a little button up here, and we can just press turn on, and it turns on the data interpreter. And there we go. You can see how it cleans up the data. Now we've got one header for each column. You can see how it has merged that one multi-row header into one single line. We can also see now type of offense, and then we can see the actual type of offense. So it has combined those two rows into one. So we have a unique variable name. And now we can work with this. So if we go to the worksheet, we can look at total arrest by team, and we can sort that, and we see if we remove total, we can see Manchester is a pretty violent city with that whole rivalry between Manchester United and Manchester City, and those two clubs have the most violent supporters with the most arrests in one season. Right. That was the data interpreter in a nutshell. That was this point. Any questions so far? I'm going to pause for a little second to take any questions. If you have any questions, please put them into the chat box. Looks like there are no questions, and we'll continue. We'll now look at the data interpreter, how it can help us with a distance problem. I have prepared another data set. This one comes from the UN, and this one is looking at refugees coming out of Syria. The UN has provided this spreadsheet with information about all the refugees. However, the way they've assembled this spreadsheet is that they have put different tables on one spreadsheet. So we see a first overview table up here. Then we get a long table here where you have different dates and different refugee numbers. And it's a very long table. This is followed by a breakdown by gender and age. And then there's some more information below that. So this is a difficult situation, but it's one that we get every once in a while when we download data from government sources or from the UN or from other sources. And this is something now that we can deal with in Tableau. So let me open up yet another instance of Tableau Desktop. No. There we go. Nope, sorry. There we go. And I'll connect to that file with my refugee data. Again, the first preview, shows us that there are a lot of problems with all these null cells. So again, we're going to turn on the data interpreter. And now what you'll see is it shows us one table. In particular, it will show us that very long table with the dates and the refugee numbers. But it also shows us here on the left-hand side, that there are other tables that we can use. So if we go back to the Excel file, for instance, if we want to use this demographic breakdown, we'd have to look for the table that's in cells A979 until column C985. And we can look for that over here, and we see this is this table over here. So what we can do is we can put that table here, and then we get a preview of that demographic breakdown, that subtable on the spreadsheet. And now we can work with this. We can look at the number of refugees. We can compare men and women, and we can add the age. Do we have age? Yeah, we have age. It's called demography breakdown here. We can use age. We can break it down by age. We can also flip this and reverse the axis, and we can change the sort order, and then we have a little population pyramid if you want. And we can see most refugees are in the 18 to 59 age group. Right, that was the data interpreter, and I see there's a question coming in. Let me pause here. Right, how do I change a number like 0.41582 to something more like 4.1%? Yeah. So what you can do, let me show the numbers here, the actual numbers. What you can do is you can go into your variable, and you can go into format, and you can change the number, what do you say, the type of number, and then you can specify, for example, how many decimal places do you want to show. Does that answer your question? And doing it this way, it will change the axis as we've just seen, and you can also go into the actual variable here, default properties, number format, and then that will change the formatting for all the variables used on the view, including the labels. In this case, it doesn't make any sense what I've just done, but I think you get the idea. Yeah. Okay. Cool. That answers the question. Let me close this. Let's see what's the next item on our itinerary. Yes, we've got joins. So far we've used data that's in one spreadsheet. Sometimes, of course, your data is spread out across different sources. And one way to combine data is to use a join. So in theory, this is what a join looks like. So say you have one table with columns A, B, C, and then you have another table with columns D, E, and F. You can merge them so that they're side by side, and you have one big table with 5 columns now, and the rows will match according to whatever you tell the software is the matching the variable. So in this case, it'll be the names here. You want to match by name, so the first one will be John and John, Mike and Mike, Lisa and Lisa will go together. You'll notice that the second column here doesn't have Pat and Linda. which is why in the final table those rows will be empty. And this is something you can choose if you choose, as in this chart, a left join. A left join would be where you keep all the rows from the left variable. You could also do a right join where you keep all the rows from the right table and then match the ones from the left table accordingly. Let's look at this in practice. Let me open up a new data set. This is also on the refugee situation, so this is a very topical topic. And this data set is also from the UN. This is looking at asylum seekers in different countries. And I have also then downloaded, let me actually open the Excel file first. I have also downloaded a file with the population numbers of the countries, because I was interested in looking at how many asylum seekers are there in different countries, but then also I wanted to put that into perspective and see how many asylum seekers are there per person, right? So you can see I have one table with the number of asylum seekers for different countries, but then I have a second tab down here in my Excel file that gives me the population data. So how many people live in these countries. And this is in million. So Germany has 80 million people, for example. If I open this up in Tableau, that didn't work. There we go. If I open it up in Tableau, now I don't get any preview because Tableau doesn't know which of the two sheets I want to work with. So what I have to do is I have to drag the first sheet onto this field here, and now I get a preview of my data. And this takes a second. These are, I think, 300,000 rows. So it takes a little while to load. There we go. And here I have my number of asylum seekers for different countries and different countries of origin at different time periods. And so for example, we can look at which country has had the most asylum seekers over the last few years. And you can see this is Germany. But then, of course, a country like France or a country like the UK has a smaller population than Germany, so of course they also have fewer refugees. So let's add that information. How big are those countries? This is something I have in this other table. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this onto this field, and I'm going to drag it right next to my first table. And now I get this little symbol here that tells me that these two have been joined. And you'll notice now that I have more columns than I had before, and particularly now I have this population column. And we can see the little gray text here shows that this comes from the population data table, whereas these other columns, they come from this table with this terrible long name, which is basically the asylum seekers. And these have been matched by country automatically, but we could change that manually by clicking on this join symbol. And here you can see which variables has Tableau used to match the two. In this case, it used country of asylum because the same variable name exists in both sheets. If, for example, it was called differently in the other sheet, I would probably have to tell it manually by selecting the variable here, which are the two that go together. You can also choose the type of join here, whether it's a left join, a right join, or inner join. In this case, the inner join has been chosen, and that works well for me because the inner join only takes those rows for which we have data from both data sets, if that makes sense. So I'm going to use the inner join. I'm going to close this. And if I go into my worksheet, I find now the population data from the population data table here, and I can add that to the view, and I can see the population numbers next to the refugee numbers. I can see, for example, Sweden. Sweden up here has a very short bar in terms of population, but a fairly long bar in terms of asylum seekers. And of course, what I can also do is I can calculate a ratio. I can take the asylum seekers and I can divide it by the number of populations. So I look at the number of asylum seekers per 1 million people, and I get a third column now, and I can sort that. I can see that Sweden actually has the most asylum refugees. It's given asylum to the most refugees based on the Swedish population, so per person, per Swedish citizen. Does that make sense? So there's a question coming in. It looks like you're already doing inner join if you're doing a calculation. You don't have to, but the thing is, when you're using both at the same time, both variables from both tables, you obviously need data from both tables, and so that will, so the calculation will only use those rows that have data from both tables. If you're using both variables in the calculation, then obviously it needs to have data from both tables. And if you use the inner join, that's ensured because the inner join strips out any rows that only have data from one table. If you were to use a left join, and we can just quickly change that, which means we're using all the rows from the left-hand side, from the left table, and then we add any rows that we might have. We add any columns to rows that have data from the right-hand side. That means we get some rows, like this one, for example, where we don't have any data. And in this case, it makes sense because my population data is actually only for Europe. When I was using the data set, I was only looking at Europe. And so there's a row here with refugee data for Australia, but we don't have any population data. I can still work with this. And as you can see, it still works. So in the calculation here, Tableau will just strip out those rows because it doesn't have any data. It won't factor in the calculation. But you can see now Australia should still be somewhere here because we still have data for number of asylum seekers. It's just that there's no data here for population. Yeah, if that makes sense. Let me know if that answers your question. If not, we can look at it in detail after this webinar. All right, that was joins. So with joins, we add new columns side by side. Let's go on. And so one thing I should mention is you can join here, you can join things that are within the same Excel file. So these are two different spreadsheets in the same Excel files. You could also join text files that are in the same folder, so they have to sit in the same folder if you're using CSV text file. Right now, you can't join across different data sources, so different files. That will come with version 10, I believe. And it was announced yesterday that the beta version of 10.0 is out, and it was announced that it will have cross-data source joins when it comes out, when the final release comes out. Right now, if you want to join different files, there's another way you can do that. It's called blends. If you have questions about that, maybe you can look at that at the end of the webinar. We only got a couple of minutes left, so I think I want to go into unions real quick, which is the next point on my list. Where's my list? There's my list. Yeah, so we covered joins, so the next thing will be unions. Unions are a different way to merge data sets. Here, instead of putting them side by side, like in a join, in a union, we put the data, the different tables on top of each other. And we do this in cases where both data sets have the same column headers, so ABC, ABC, and the final table also has ABC as column headers, but where we have different rows stored in different tables. So this could, for example, be a situation when you, I don't know, say you're running a survey every year, and every year you get a new table with new answers, but you have asked the same question, so you can just add the table below and you can append your data set, and your data set basically grows the more data you collect. Does that make sense? Maybe it will make more sense when I show you a real-life example. Let me show you this example. This is a data set a colleague of mine found. She's been looking at house prices in London, and she got from the city of London. She got this data set, but it gives you the house sales for 2015 in one Excel spreadsheet, and then there's a second table in the same file that gives us the sales for 2014. So they've been collected in two different tables, and now we need to stack them on top of each other. You need to create a union. So in Tableau, we do this as follows. We connect to Excel. We open the spreadsheet. Again, it shows us there are two spreadsheets in this Excel file, and we can drag them into this field, and we get the preview of the first spreadsheet. And what we can do now is we can drag the second one on top of the first one, and as I do so, you notice this, you'll see this orange notification that pops up, and it says drag table to union. So when I release the mouse, no, that didn't work. Let me try that again. I think I moved my mouse. You need to wait for the orange thing to pop up. There we go. There we go. Now we can see this little plus sign here, and we see there's two data sets on top of each other. That means there's a union going on here, and we should be able to see the two different data sets in the preview now. So we see the first couple of rows, and there's a lot of them. They're all from the London 2014 data set. And this is some information that Tableau has added. It has added this column here to tell you from which table these rows come. If we scroll down, they're still all from the same data set. I have to show more tables. We're only seeing the first 1,000 here. I have to see more rows. Now we should be able to see more rows. If I scroll down, 2014, 2014, 2014, and 2015. So now you can see at the bottom, all the rows come from the 2015 data set. Right? So now they're on top of each other, those two data sets, and they create one large data set with twice as many rows, probably or approximately twice as many rows. Now, this is a union, and one thing that comes in very handy when you're working with union are so-called splits, column splits. You can use that straight away here. So, for instance, if you want to know which row comes from the year 2015 and which row comes from the year 2014, we can use that information that's contained in this column now with the table names. And this is often the case, that the tables that you get from a government, they'll have a name that has the year in it for which this data is for, or some other information that you might find useful. So in this case, let's extract 2015 or 2014. Let's extract the year out of this column. So to do that, we go into the little menu here, and we say split. And now Tableau tries to think about what you might want, and it figures out that you want the year, and it gives you a new column, and we can call that year. So this was a little magic trick. Sometimes, often this works. Basically what it does, it looks for like some kind of symbol that separates two or more pieces of information. In this case, it looked for the space symbol in between London and the year, and it figured London is not London is a row, so that's not needed. So it just gives us the second part of that split. You can also do this manually. If you go into the same menu, you can go to custom split, and you can now say look for a spacebar or whatever other symbol you want. So for instance, if I wanted only the 14 or 15, so the last two digits of the year, I don't know why I would want that, but say I just want a two-digit year, I could look for the 0, which is preceding the 14 and the 15, and I could say split off the last one column. If I do that, it now gives me the two-digit year, 14 or 15. And now we can work with this data. We can use our year variable, 2014, 2015, and we can look at the average house price, and we can see it has gone up. Yeah, that's I'm sure there's a lot more you can get out of the data set, but we're running out of time. If you have, there's a question coming in. I'll look at the question, and if you have time, I'll stick around for 5 more minutes to do one more thing. If I look at my service, yeah, so we've covered unions, and I've just shown you the split and the custom split. So the last thing I want to do is I just do a pivot real quick, and then maybe I'll take the question if that's all right with you. So the pivot is a transformation of a data set. And if you're familiar with the terms wide and tall, then you know what this is. Basically, you're going from a wide format where you have lots of columns into a tall format where you have very few columns. If you're familiar with pivot tables in Excel, this might be a little confusing. It's related to that, but it's exactly the opposite. When you create a pivot table in Excel, you're going from the tall format to a wide format. Here, it's exactly the opposite. In theory, this is what a pivot looks like. So if you have two columns, B and C, and you don't want to carry on lots of columns, you just want one column with the data, a column E, that has the data from both B and C in one column. You can do that. You can stack them on top of each other, those two columns, the blue one and the green one. You'll then need a new column that tells you which variable this data comes from, so we label BBBCCC, and you'll need to copy any identifiers that you have, any row identifiers. So in this case, it'll be the names of the people here. They'll be just duplicated so that you have that for all rows, if that makes sense. I hope it will make more sense when we look at an actual example. So let me open an example. This is a data set that looks at CO2 emissions by country. So each row is one country. And the data is stored in the wide format. You can see it's very wide, has a lot of columns, and each column is 1 year. Right? And the way this looks in Tableau is as follows. When I open this data set, I'm going to use the CO2 per country spreadsheet. First thing we need to do is we need to switch on the data interpreter because there's this funny title here, so you need to clean that up. And now we have all the different columns, and each column is 1 year. And there's a lot of them, I think over 40 years or 50 years of data. And so if you were to go into a spreadsheet, into a worksheet, and you wanted to build a chart, there's a lot of variables here. I mean, like, how do you work with that? It's a lot of variables. So that's not very handy. So actually what you want in an ideal case is you just want one column with the actual CO2 emissions, with the actual data, and you want a second column that tells you which year that data is from. So actually all we need is 2 columns. And the way you do that is you pivot this data, you swivel it around, you stack all the different columns on top of each other, so you only get one very tall column. And the way you do this in Tableau is we select using the control key or using the shift key to select several columns in one go. We select all the data columns, not the country column here, but all the data columns with all the different years. And holding shift, I'm going to select all of them. I'm going to go into the flow menu, and I'm going to select pivot. And now we have two variables. We have all the CO2 emissions all stacked on top of each other. And then next to it we have an identifier column that tells us which year these CO2 emissions come from. So we can rename those. We can call this year, and we can call this CO2. And now we can work with this. We can look at CO2 over the years. You can see it's been going up, unfortunately. And we can look at the countries. And you can see the U.S. down here, United Kingdom, and a whole bunch of smaller countries, South Asia. Russia, interesting, has a huge jump here right after the fall of the Iron Curtain, 1990, something like that. Right after that, a huge jump in CO2 emissions. India, slowly but steadily growing. Germany as well, after the EU unification, and China, of course. So now we can easily work with this data. We just have 2 variables, CO2 emissions and the year, and we can easily play around with that. I hope that makes sense. If not, let me know if you have any more questions. I'm sorry I went over by a few minutes. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to answer the question in the chat box now. If you want to stick around, if you have any other questions later on, feel free to email me. There's my email address, as well as the team email. So feel free to reach out to us. As I mentioned, this is a new format. We're trying this for the first time today, going deeper into one particular topic rather than just a broad introduction to Tableau Public. If you found this useful or if you think this can be improved, please let us know. Either just email me or feel free to fill in this it's a very short survey, a 2-question survey. And I'm going to copy this link into the chat box as well. We appreciate any feedback you might have. So thank you very much for your attention. Yeah, we hope that was useful, and we hope to see any visualizations that you might be creating using this information, using what you learned today. So feel free to send us those as well. We're always excited to see what people are creating. So thank you for that. And let me look at that last question that came in. You create a map using a list of cities that are all from one U.S. state, and some cities populate on the map to another state. What did you do wrong? Okay. The short answer would be, I guess you need in your data set another column that has the state as well. So you need 2 columns. One is the city names, and then a second column is the state column, and you need to add both into the view. That's, I think, the short answer without knowing what your actual data set looks like. But feel free to send me your data set, and I'll be happy to look at it in more detail. Again, send it to this email address here. I'm happy to look at your particular problem there. Feel free to also share with me your, if you already have a link, if you've already published it to Tableau Public, feel free to share with me the link to your visualization so I can see where exactly you got stuck. Does that make sense? Cool. Great. Any other questions? Yep, doesn't look like it. So thanks again for attending, and have a good day. Bye for now.